Welcome! My name is Elena Kundro. I am the host of the Vitality Hub podcast, a space to embrace all parts of yourself, align with your truth, and find new, graceful ways to navigate life's challenges. Over the past 12 years, I've been on my own healing journey of integrating my traumatic childhood and turning my illnesses into wellness. Along the way, I've earned a degree in health sciences, trained in various coaching and therapeutic modalities. And since 2018, I've been blessed to be helping clients invite more vitality into all areas of their lives. Hence the name of the show, Vitality Hub. So my goal with this podcast is to introduce you to tools that can help you create a life that you truly love. Thanks for tuning in, and let the show begin. Hello, everyone who's tuning back into Vitality Hub podcast. Today's episode is going to be all about inner child work in a teenager, working through those wounds, seeing how that affects our daily lives today, and as always, providing tools and experiences how you can integrate it and heal your own inner child, your teenager, and just gain more awareness of how that is playing out in your life. And for that, I have a beautiful guest, Bhavi, who works in this field, and she has so much wisdom in her life and working with people in this area. So I'm so happy to have you today on the podcast and hear all of your experiences and wisdom and what you can share with the listeners, because from the small conversation and interactions I had with you, I can see that you've gained a lot in this field. So maybe we can start by you saying why you chose specifically inner child, inner teenager, why it was so impactful for you in your life.
Yeah, thanks, Selena, for having me. And it's great to dialogue with you on this podcast together. I started my inner child journey when I was about 24 years old. I'm now 39, so it was quite a while back. And it was just a very tumultuous time in my life. I was really struggling with my relationship with my parents, my home life, my relationships with my family. It was just, I was going through a really tough time. And I heard about this process called Hoffman process. It's in UK, it's like a deep dive 8-day course. And I just decided to participate. And that was the kind of beginning step of my inner child journey, and connecting with looking at what my wounds were from childhood, what my unresolved emotions were that I was carrying from childhood, and how to really find peace with my past. And that's really the aim of inner child work and teenage work, is to find a peaceful connection to whatever happened in our past with our families and our parents. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to have a particularly dysfunctional childhood, although, you know, that it covers that, of course. But it's really just finding a peaceful connection with our childhood and our teenage years. So that's the kind of purpose. And I started with the Hoffman process, and then I went deeper into a process called Primal and Tantra, which is specifically childhood, and Tantra is teenage wounds. So teenage wounds are different to childhood, but it's kind of looking at the ages between, well, teenagers 13 to 19 years old, and childhood is 13 all the way to birth. So we're looking at all the developmental wounds that happen from the womb into your childhood and into your teenage years.
The childhood is 13 to 0. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, when we do the training, we actually do it from like 7 or 8, because that's childhood years, and then there's a bit of a transition.
Yeah, I thought so. It's like, okay, interesting. Okay, yeah. So what was the main benefit for you for doing this child work? Because you said you had some difficulties with the parents and your internal, I imagine, sense of feelings. And what was it that made you want to dedicate this next portion of your life specifically for this?
Yeah, sure. I I mean, the whole process for me of going into this work deeper is a process of growing up. You know, it's not just about growing old. Everybody grows old, but it's a process of really becoming an adult. And that is not a journey that everybody takes because we want to stay in being a child or being an adolescent. So by taking responsibility for the wounds of whatever happened, and kind of it's like a maturation process of becoming an adult, taking responsibility for your life. And when we do that, then it opens up a whole new possibility of how to live your life, essentially. But when I did it, I mean, I did many different processes, and at each process, I was healing something different in my life. When I did Primal, I was going through a burnout at that time. I was like completely knocked out and burnt out. And so the childhood and teenage process at that time helped me to heal, essentially, and find back the gifts of my childhood qualities, which we forget in our adult lives, you know, and also the teenage passion, the dreams, the sensitivity, the longing. So it is about healing wounds, and as much as it is about going into the unresolved emotions that we carry with our parents, and however we got wounded, neglected, you know, deprioritized, whatever happened, it's also about finding the gifts from the childhood and teenage years, so you can take those gifts and use them as resources in our life today as adults.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I don't think I've really heard that expression of the inner child work and inner teenage work, that it is a process of growing up, because we all grow old, right? But we can grow old and be still immature people, immature emotionally, overrun by our wounds, our exiles, our protectors, and not really being authentically us. And when we come back to it, what I'm hearing from you, what you're saying, and from my own experience, it is embracing that inner authenticity that was always there, but it got covered by all these wounds, right?
Yeah, wounds, yeah, essentially. And whenever we carry something that's unresolved from childhood or teenage years, and especially from childhood, because when we were children, we came with we were a blank slate. So whatever happened in...
I would disagree a little bit because of the, you know, generational trauma and the conception traumas as well. It starts from the very beginning. So you kind of still, as a child in mom's womb, you still can feel what's the environment like, you know, all of these things. If you have older siblings, like in my case, that I knew they are consuming all this attention of my mom, and that my mom is depressed, my dad is abusive, and that my dad doesn't want me here, then I am coming into this world already with this imprinted belief in my mind that I am not welcome in this life. I am not worthy. So that's why I spent all of my life, and up until now, I'm still working with this wound of trying to prove my worth, that I'm so worthy to be in this world. Because there's deep wound that I'm not worthy to be here. I don't belong here, that I should not exist, because it was that deep, deep imprinting when I was still, you know, in conception. But
yeah, actually, I completely agree with that. So the imprint starts in the womb, and whatever mother is feeling gets absorbed into your kind of unconscious, and especially messages like if you were not wanted, or if it was, you know, so yeah, it starts in the womb, and then it continues as, you know, the developmental stages move forward. So yeah. But what I meant to say was that whatever happens to us in childhood imprints deeper than it does perhaps as an adult, because we're much more absorbent of the environment. So maybe as an adult, if someone says something, it doesn't touch me as deeply as it did when I was a child, where I absorbed the environment much stronger, like soaking it all up.
oh yes, I for sure agree with that. I don't know, probably you've heard of Gabor Mate and all his work.
Yeah.
And his main thing is if you can raise a child in a secure, loving family until 3 years old, and then, whatever should happen, that child is still going to be better off than living first 3 years in a complete chaos and then from 3 years old being in a loving environment. And you can really see that with adopted kids who had that early trauma and then they are adopted in good families, but still they're struggling so much with mental health, even though like why? And when you come back to childhood, the answer is clear. So what do you because I know there are so many methods of working with inner child wounds, the inner child work, parts work, IFS, hypnotherapy. Can you maybe introduce a bit to the methods that you find most useful for yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm actually trained in Primal Training, which is like a process where we go back to those wounds and we go back to the past. So we start at the older child of 7 years old and it goes back each developmental stage. And essentially it's looking at either expressing what was unexpressed, resolving what was unresolved. And it's a meeting of your adult self today with all the resources and the experiences and the adult woman or the adult man that you've become. And it's giving an opportunity for each of those stages to find resolution. So whatever was kind of unfinished, and each developmental stage has a different need, So for example, there is a stage in childhood where we are learning to say no. We're learning to set our boundaries, to express our anger, and if that was stopped, then we might struggle with that as an adult.
And there's so many people struggling with setting boundaries and no wonder. So I love that approach. It's basically coming to each of the development. What are the developmental stages? Maybe you can walk us through that so that we can.
I mean, I won't go through them all in detail because it requires
too much. Yeah,
it's quite a lot. But so I mean, the first, okay, I can start like, for example, with the womb. So that's one stage, and the womb wound is all about safety and trust and needs, and it's the womb. So when we're looking at healing, for example, issues from the womb, then we're looking at those very tender and sensitive needs. So even at a very, very young age, the first kind of stages is looking at needs, so what were your needs? Where were your needs not met? It's about trust. It's about surrender. And then as you grow, there's another stage which is called the oral stage. The oral stage is about needs. And then we're looking at the stages of boundaries. So as you start to have legs and get a bit of strength and you're running around and you're learning to say no, you're learning to set boundaries. That's looking at expressions of anger, of saying no, of saying, that stage you could get stopped, or you could get threatened, or you could get shamed. So that could stop maybe your self-expression, And then as you grow older, then we're looking at more of the sensuousness. So when we're maybe 6 or 7 years old, that's the sensuous child. So this is the child that, maybe feels when it goes. It's actually, Swarup was saying that age child then links to our sensuality or sexuality in teenage years. So it first comes as a child. So that's the child which knows how to enjoy, feels the wind on the face. So that's the sensuality. And if sensuality was stopped or shamed, then we can kind of block or repress some of the gifts or qualities that we have.
Or the child was disassociated from the body because of some traumas, then it can also block, as I imagine.
Yes, exactly. I mean, disassociation is something that can happen at any age. That's not necessarily linked to that developmental age or wound.
Yeah, sure. It's just because that sensuality, sometimes feeling the wind, it's who's going to shame you for feeling the wind? But if you are so disembodied from your body, then you won't be able to develop that sensational awareness. That was my point.
Yes, absolutely. And also the gifts that gives you in your adult life. Maybe today we still shame that part of ourselves, or we don't allow ourselves to enjoy that cup of tea like we would when we were a child. Or so, it really is looking at also the gifts and bringing those childhood qualities into our adult life to give ourselves juice and joy in our daily lives, which is important because I think as adults we can quickly just go into functioning. Maybe we're very good at being functional adults, but we forget the qualities and the essential qualities that can make our life a lot richer in adult life.
So I feel like that would definitely apply for parentified children who have to take on the qualities of parents, to regulate their parents, to look outwardly what the needs of the parents are, the phoning response, like all the nervous system's regulations. And yeah, I found that very important. Even yesterday I had a session with a client who she was 5 months old when she was taken to a nursery, and she disassociated from her body because of that experience. And like what you said, even though I was working through internal family systems model, to come back to that situation and to hold that child, all she needed was her to hold her hand, and it was all dissipated. So that need of safety, comfort, and I think the wound of safety and that nurture is in so many of us. And that, how do you find that is expressing itself in our daily life? What have you noticed?
It's really interesting. I love what you share about the parentified child. I was a parentified child, yeah. So I had to be the emotional caretaker of my dad, essentially. And, and because of that, I forgot my needs. So that was a particular developmental wound I was working on. But the role I took on, so this is another interesting thing that we do when we do the inner child process, is we look at the role that we take on in our family as a way of keeping the peace and keeping the family system kind of going. So the role that I took on in my family was being a caretaker. And this was really interesting because when I first started sessions and working with my clients, one of the things that Sarup pointed out quite quickly was I'm doing that with my clients. So I was caretaking in my sessions, for example, or when I was doing my practice sessions. So this caretaker role was very insightful for me because I realized that I take it on everywhere in my adult life. I forget my needs. I tune out to myself, basically, and I'm always checking in what other people need. And that was part of my burnout because it was constantly taking care of everybody else's needs and not listening to my needs and what I needed, because that was the way that I was conditioned. Or also that's what I had to do to keep the peace of the family, to survive almost. So it's interesting that you talked about the parentified child. And I think one of the things that we learned about in the childhood process is the role that you took on. And there's different roles. So you could take on the role of the garbage bin or the role of the, the responsible one, the hero.
The hero child. I resonate with that a lot. And that part of me that wants to prove, to validate my worth was very tied to the hero child, because then I have to excel at everything that I do to just prove my worth. And it was always said that my brothers, my grandma used to say, I don't know what they will amount to, but Elena, she'll be good. She's gonna rise to the stars. And that's how I got my validation, and that's how I put myself into this role of being the hero child. And how that played out in my life was that I always had to be in the first three number ones, in school, in uni, in all my even after school activities, like in my art school or my dance classes. And now that I have my own business, my own practice, it's harder because there's no ceiling, there's the whole world to compete. There's no grade that I'm going to be given. So it's very hard to fulfill that need to be that hero child. And that's why I'm doing this work to integrate that and to notice that. So the hero child, basically someone who is perfectionistic, who wants to prove the value, to kind of, it has also that taking part as well, because it kind of wants to make sure everybody's right. My top dreams are to buy my mom a house, which is like so caretaking of me. And actually, when I connect to other therapists, a lot of them come to this profession because of their roles as children, as caretaking parts, and the ones who are regulating the family, who are analyzing everyone's behavior and what's needed of them to bring harmony to the family, which is very useful in this profession because they can scan people, I can naturally attune and see what needs to be done. But at the same time, like you said, it's very easy to burn out, to not notice what's happening.
Yeah, definitely. Over empathy can be not for you. It can be something that's too much, and it can be at your expense. But it's interesting. The hero child is an interesting role. I think it's the hero child is, I'm loved for what I do, not who I am. And so I'm not seen for who I am. It's what I achieve. Then I'm loved. So I think it's about being seen, isn't it? Like when we start to see ourselves, and we also surround ourselves with people that can see the qualities in us rather than what we achieve, that can be a source of healing. I know certainly that's been for me, because I also wasn't seen in my family, and that's a very painful wound. It's invisible because you can't necessarily see what's happening with that wound, but being seen is quite a significant wound as well that we look at, because if we're not seen or mirrored for the qualities we are, then this continues, like what you said, in adulthood, and then we try to compensate for that, and then we're on some kind of a mission in our adult life to prove ourselves, and that cannot be so helpful.
Because you always have to earn and do, and I can resonate with that so much. So we can talk about the other parts, like the scapegoat, the dreamer and everything later. But I'm curious to hear, what was the process like for you to heal your own inner, the caretaker, the hero child, the being seen wound? I know I just asked it, and I'm like, from my own, like I couldn't answer this question, but just do what you want with that.
I think, the process is not easy, and I found primal work quite painful at many points, because you wake up to what role you're put in, you wake up to the dysfunction in your family, you wake up to it wasn't all. For me, I'm also an Enneagram type 7, so Enneagram is personality types. So my personality type was being the happy child. And I was kind of forced to be this happy child where I had no problems, nothing. But in our family, happiness was accepted, joy was accepted, sadness was not accepted. But there was a lot of sadness, there was a lot of difficulty. My parents were always fighting, so there was just no room for me to express or feel those emotions. So going through that process, and I'm still going through it, today, was painful at many points, because when you bring awareness to something, or you shine a light on a wound, it's not so easy. But I think finding good teachers and safe spaces is really important. I mean, I was very lucky because I did the training with Swaroop. So she's my teacher and she has many, many years experience in this. So the insights that she gave me were very, very powerful, especially with this caretaking. I mean, in the training, I would get an insight that would take me months to process because, just recognizing that, oh, I'm caretaking my dad all the time, even today, and how it impacts my areas of my life and what it's cost me. And then, okay, now I need to look after my needs. I need to ask myself, what do I need? And it could be basic things like, what do I need to eat? And where do I want to go? And who do I want to spend time with? And what are my boundaries? And how do I want to relate? So that connection to myself is a journey that I'm still on. But that was quite profound, actually, when I did this work.
And you say that it's affecting your life, that you're caretaking of your dad. How is it affecting your life?
So when I first realized this caretaking, well, I think that was the source of my burnout, because it was always trying to save my family, essentially, from, and I'll just give you a background. When I was 7 years old, we went financially bankrupt. So I went through a very, very difficult teenage years. We were, financially in difficult times. We were moving from house to house. It was very unstable, and my teenage years were very unstable. So I naturally forgot myself. I tuned out and tried to be the piece of the family, to try to take care of my mom's need. It was like, this. So essentially, that those patterns continue in your adult life. And I think that was one of the reasons why I burnt out. But it also showed up in my relationship, this caretaking partner all the time.
Yeah, and then of course, you can't get away from it when it's so evident and present. And I think it's even harder for people who didn't have this big trauma or big dysfunctional happenings in your family, because then it's harder to spot, like what you said about not being seen. It's can be so masked in families that are, functional, and everything is, you're provided, you go on holidays, nobody's fighting, at least not explicitly, maybe there's some shutdown happening, stonewalling. It's hard to notice those subtle traumas when it was kind of a functional family, and to work with them. Have you what have you noticed while experiencing yourself and seeing other people's processes in the group setting? Do all people come to such healing processes who have been through some big shit in their lives, kind of like evident, or people who kind of had everything all good also have those deep experiences? And
it's really interesting. I thought nothing was wrong with my childhood for a long time. I had a great childhood as well. I mean, up to the ages of 7, we were great. And, I think that's an interesting question. My experience, like I said, it took me a long time to even realize I had wounds from the past, because the process is also about becoming an individual and growing out of your family. And like I said, growing into your adulthood and stepping outside of your family system and becoming more you. Swaroop clearly says that it's for everyone. It's not just for people who have had particularly strong traumatic childhoods. I
definitely agree with Swaroop. That's what I'm saying. Everybody needs this.
Everybody.
I found that people who, it's very hard to identify the trauma when it's not so clear cut, right?
Yes, exactly. It can be quite subtle.
Yeah, now even that you share this, even though my childhood was clearly dysfunctional and clearly loaded, even me, I was at some stages of my life where I thought, I'm not affected. I went out of this, I'm gone, nothing inside of me. But yeah, I think it takes time. It takes awareness, and it takes some resilience to feel the pain.
Yes, that's so beautiful. I love what you share. It takes time to realize, that I was wounded, that there was stuff, even if my parents were trying my best, even if, like you said, it was so called functional, there is still work that we can do on ourselves. We were still maybe placed in a role, that we carry on in our adult lives. So it doesn't matter so much about how traumatic or not traumatic it was. Essentially, the work is about finding that connection back with your child, taking care of yourself, growing into an adult, and individuating.
Yes, and not comparing your childhood to other people's childhood and think that, oh, mine wasn't that bad like theirs, so who am I to do any healing? And it's kind of feeling that you are not being loyal to your parents for doing this inner work because it's judging the way they raised you. And I find that a lot of people don't even want to go to their childhoods because they don't want to lose that connection with their parents,
Yeah,
because they think that if they were to look at all of the issues that stem from childhood, it means that their parents are wrong, bad, and they did a bad job. But it doesn't mean that.
no, it doesn't mean
It,
that.
it
In fact, yeah, absolutely. In fact, you don't even need your parents in this process. It's a self to self journey. So when we do this work and when we go through the unresolved emotions, you don't even involve your parents because what we're
yes,
looking at
I
internalized in our head.
yes, I totally agree. But what I meant is internally, the parents internally were afraid to look at, not into like specifically eye to
Yeah.
eye, but even internally and psychologically to look at that because we want to justify that we had good parents. It's hard to admit. So yeah, I totally agree that you don't have to involve your parents at all. It's all internal process, but still, yeah, it's
It's
hard when
finding loyalty to yourself.
yeah.
And I think what was it called? Misguided loyalty. So
Mm.
as children, we feel that we're loyal to our parents and then that continues, but that's misguided loyalty because what we need to do is find that loyalty to ourselves in our journey. And that individuation process, I think, is I guess it's there for everyone. This splitting yourself from your parents and finding who you are.
Yeah, and also it doesn't mean that your parents are all wrong because
Exactly.
I love my mom. I have a very good relationship with her. We talk regularly, but still, there like there are wounds that stem from neglect in my childhood, and it was very hard for me to work on her because I know she did all her best. She sacrificed her life for me, and that's why it was very hard to look at the things that she didn't do well.
Yes, it is. That's misguided loyalty where we feel loyal to our parents as opposed to my authentic feeling of anger or my authentic. But this is an interesting one because I think, for example, when we feel angry at our parents for, like you mentioned, the neglect or something that was lacking in our childhood where we couldn't necessarily express our feelings or emotions, um, that process requires someone that's good to allow you to express your feelings, everything that was unexpressed, without what I was mentioning, without involving your parents. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to go and blast your parents out today or anything, but it's finding that healthy expression of anger or whatever was emotionally repressed or suppressed and finding a place of expressing it. And essentially, it is the self-to-self journey.
Yeah.
When we look at the parents, we're not looking at the parents of today. Maybe our parents have grown old, maybe they've changed, maybe they've died. So we're not looking at the parents of today. We're actually dealing with the parents of the past that live in entities inside of us. So we're looking at the parents of our childhood, and the internalized parents that we carry around with us wherever we go. And when we have unresolved issues with our parents, it's more looking at the internal parents, which become our superego. So I think that was the point that was that I was sharing, that it doesn't have to involve your parents, this process, which is quite beautiful, actually.
I love that. I find that I have internal grandmother for sure, because my inner critic is just speaking her voice completely. And I think for many people, they randomly just have those, those voices. And if you were to really see who is speaking, it can be your internalized parent, right?
Yes,
Or
exactly. Yeah, and that awareness is quite insightful anyway, because I'm like, oh, who's talking to me right now? Oh, it's like my mom or my dad. So it's finding peace and resolution with the parents that we carry inside of us, essentially.
I love that. And especially for people who had parents who were very abusive, neglectful, it's very hard, because when you come to this spiritual development, whatever, the message is you have to forgive your parents. You have to make sure you have good relationship with your parents. Otherwise, you will never have good relationships with your lovers. You will never have money. You will never have good career. And that puts so much pressure on fixing the relationship. And for me, my dad was abusive. He abused my mom and wanted an abortion and like a lot of things. But somehow I was still born, and first 2 years of my life were filled with abuse, beating up, terror, all kinds of things. And my mom was just disassociated and depressed until my younger brother was born, and then she just realized she has to run away. She did run away a lot of times, but how it is with people who are narcissists and psychopaths, they find their way to get you back. And if you don't have that stability elsewhere, it's just very hard to keep your boundary. But when it got super bad, she did run away, but it was already, I was like 2.5 or something. I was 2.5, a little over 2.5. So that first imprint was done, and I see how that's affecting my life, and I see that my dad didn't change, and he's continued to abuse other women, other families. His other children that he ended up growing and abusing them in all kinds of ways. And I just, when hearing all these messages that I have to forgive my dad and make amends and all these things, I'm like, I don't know, like I just wish that person was dead to not continue any harm. But what brought me actually that release was when I was in Vipassana, and somehow that happened naturally. And what they say, that forgiveness is a natural process of healing. When you heal, something just happens and it's hard to even explain it. And then there was another point in my life that I clearly remember was when I was listening to a podcast. It was Matt Kahn talking, and he was saying how we have those, earthly parents that came here as souls, and, if you believe in souls and all of these ties that you come here in this earth to experience. And he said, don't let those parents prevent you from meeting with your true parents, which are divine parents. And for me, that was like, whoa, yeah, that's so true. Like, why do I keep reanalyzing when I can heal all of those wounds by connecting to the divine parents and kind of letting go? I don't know if that makes sense because it's very hard to explain the inner process. Maybe you have something to say about that.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that very, personal story and your own journey with childhood. I mean, I feel quite touched hearing your story so vulnerably and so openly as well. I really, I agree with you about what you say about forgiveness. Like I used to get so annoyed when people, because I did the Hoffman process when I was 24. So I understood quite quickly that, and I mean, I couldn't forgive my parents. I was so angry. I had so much anger, like pent up for such a long time. If someone said to me, forgive your parents, I could just feel this like frustration in me. And I think what I've learned is that forgiveness is not the goal of the work. It's not like we do all this so that we can forgive our parents, because that may or may not come. We might not forgive them, but the child cannot forgive. So this was something that I learned, is that the child part of us cannot forgive and has rightful anger about what happened. So the child in us has a complete right not to forgive because what happened was completely unacceptable. But as an adult, by doing this work, and my experience is that I've found a healthy compassion for my parents. But that's not been necessarily the goal of the work, but it's been an outcome because of the process that I've been on in terms of allowing my child to express and really finding that connection, that it's my responsibility to heal my child now. And that's what I find, is that the aim of this work is finding a peaceful connection with the past and with your parents. Because if I'm relating to my parents today as an adult, not as a regressed child, then I can see my mom and dad as an adult. If I'm still regressing as a child and then I meet my parents, then that's something that I've learned, is in relating with my parents, when I interact with them coming from a place of adulthood. This is very difficult though, because
yeah, I totally get that. It's building that capacity to feel your inner spaciousness, that inner centeredness.
yes,
yeah, that's what IFS talks about, the inner self. That's what Buddhism talks about. All religions, coming back. It's just that some religions like Christianity kind of shames you into that state, and it's really not healthy. Whereas like Buddhism, through practice, through meditation, you can get there. And then IFS kind of gave me a shortcut to connecting to that by unburdening my other parts.
yeah,
Lovely. I think that conversation about parents and forgiveness is a big one. But I want to circle back because we started talking about, those child roles that we have and we undertake and then we develop. Because I was in ACA a few years ago. That's adult children of parents who are dysfunctional, alcoholics, and so on. And I think that was the first place where I actually realized how messed up my family was, because I always thought, like, it wasn't the best, but it wasn't that bad. Like I didn't want to look at it. Yeah, but then when I'm reading the book and I'm in the meetings and I'm reading all the dysfunctions and everything that's happening internally, I remember I was like, oh my God, how do you know that, like, the book was describing so well what I'm feeling, especially about the whole, hero child attributes that I was carrying. And I was like, whoa, I felt so seen. And that's why I think it's important to touch upon these characteristics so that other people could also start maybe paying more attention towards their own tendencies.
Yeah. Yes. So with the childhood roles, I think, I mean, like what you shared, is the awareness is the first step. Just being out of that denial, because denial is something that we well, I think many of us probably faced in our childhood. It's like, everything's fine, you know, what's the problem? And then as you go deeper into this work, you're like, same experience with me. I was like, oh, actually, I've got loads of stuff that I need to work on. So, yeah, I mean, with the childhood roles, was there a specific like thought process you had on it that you wanted to share more on, or?
Hmm. Yeah, I was thinking to go through the key characteristics. Like we talked about the caretaker who needs to take care of everyone, to manage everybody's emotions, and kind of people pleasers fall into that as well. I think. Then the hero children who just want to prove their worth, to be the best at everything, to be hard workers, hustlers, workaholics. Then you mentioned some other categories. So I
Yeah,
know
so
the scapegoat, yeah,
scapegoat, yeah, the garbage bin, the
yeah.
scapegoat, or that's where the everything that's dysfunctional with the family will just get chucked onto the garbage bin. You can also play two roles. I think I was a caretaker garbage bin,
Yeah,
but
there's always the primary and then the secondary mostly.
secondary, yeah. So, yeah, the garbage bin is really where all the rubbish of the family gets put onto the garbage bin, and they're treated like they're the problem of the family, as a way to maintain the family system. Um, so that's the garbage bin of the family. But often my experience is that the garbage bin role of the family is often the one that does the work more. They come to these kind of, I don't know, that's my experience or perception. Um, Whereas if you're the golden child, it's harder to realize that and to come out of that because you've been kind of treated differently. So I don't know if that's true or not. That's just been my
It
experience.
makes sense. It makes sense. Not in my family, but I can see why. Yeah.
They seek out this work more, isn't it? And then there's the mascot. And I'm still trying to understand that role a little bit better. I think the mascot is the harmonizer. Do you know much about that role?
So my understanding was mostly the caretaker, the hero child, kind of
Yeah.
parallel, and then the scapegoat and the dreamer, kind of the person who just
Yes. Yeah.
disassociates
Yeah.
and just goes on dreaming and kind of like leaves the family do their thing, and it just kind of subtracts themselves into their own inner world, like maybe doing computer games, reading, listening, um, music,
Yes.
all kinds of things to just escape.
Escape. Yeah. Yeah. That was the mascot role. I'd never heard of it as a definition of the dreamer, but this is the large. I think there are many roles, isn't there? But these
Yeah,
are the
there are
kind of
sub roles in that, and yeah, I think so.
big.
But these are, when I remember reading that, and I just then started scanning my family and my partner's family, other close families that I know. I'm like, oh my god, I can see it all fitting in categories. Like, oh, people, you don't realize you've been living in this role for like 60 years of your life. Like, wake up. But I can't wake anyone up. So but I just that's why I want to do this podcast, to just educate and bring awareness to these kind of topics that I wish I knew years ago. Though
Yeah.
at the same time, now that I'm saying this, I realize that probably people who aren't willing to open up to this kind of thing won't listen. But those who do can have like a little shortcut to their healing, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to also just touch on the teenage wounds a little bit
Yes,
because
please.
that's a different thing that's mostly left unexplored. We talk a lot about childhood, childhood wounds, and it's kind of very mainstream, I would say, in a child work. Well, I wouldn't say mainstream, but it's more known about, and there's been a lot of studies and research on childhood traumas and wounds. Teenage wounds and adolescent years is something that is not so much explored, and it's a completely different type of wounding. So that starts from around 13 to 19, but actually the brain is still developing till we're 26. So it continues. But teenage years is looking at secondary emotions. So this is why I found that quite interesting, because childhood is primary emotion. So in some ways, it's a bit easier to deal with. Like we're dealing with anger and sadness and, fear, like very direct emotions. So when we're meeting the child in us, we can see what the child is feeling. With teenage years, you would never hear a teenager, right, say that I feel ashamed, or so we're looking at more kind of secondary emotions. And the emotions are more like, instead of anger, we're looking at the feeling of revenge that comes up as a teenager, or the feeling of shame. So that period of time, we're mainly addressing wounds of sexuality, of not feeling guided enough, of feeling neglected. Maybe there was an unstable environment in your teenage years. And it's also looking at healing your connection to your dreams, because that's when we might feel, when you're a teenager, you have some dreams, isn't it? Maybe you keep them secret, but there's always a dream of something or a longing. And often that can get shamed or shut down or not valued. And teenage years are such a hard time. I never want to go back to my teenage years. There's so many hormonal changes, and it's such a confusing time. So those wounds are something different altogether. And the 10-session process of healing those wounds are really looking at connecting you back to your passions, your sensuality, your sexuality, your joy for life.
Embracing shame, identity, all of that, right?
Identity, body
Because
image.
it's you're exploring all of that. I went through my own inner teenager healing process, and it was so uncomfortable experiencing all that shame, all that body change, all that sexual energy showing up. And I'm like, whoa, what's that? And then the whole identity with other peers, being left out, wanting to kind of be an individual, to be separate, but at the same time wanting to be so together, and that one with your peers, with your friends. And friends become so important. And if you have a group of friends that you're competing with each other, gossiping, and all the things that come up with that, it's so hard to navigate, and it forces to shut down so much of our uniqueness and our authenticity. And I was smiling so much when you were saying about the secondary emotions, because a few weeks ago I went to watch the Inside Out 2, and it was all about like introducing all those secondary emotions. I was like, yes. And again, I love that movie. Anyone who hasn't watched Inside Out 1 or 2, go watch it. You will understand so much more about emotions, inner parts work, and how identity and beliefs are formed. But coming back to childhood, so I hear from you that it's similar to, like, from the child work, the teenage work is also coming back to those periods when you were developing, sexually, your body, and experiencing all that was suppressed. Or is there somewhat different process from the inner child work?
It's a little bit similar in that it's always looking at your relationship between there's different parts. Like, I think IFS covers this, but there's different parts of your inner world. So you're looking at, there is the child part of you. The child part is the emotional part that feels happy, feels sad. It's the emotional part of our being. Then we have the teenage part of us, which is also wounded, but there's also the gifts of the teenager. So there's the wounded inner teenager and the healthy inner teenager. Like, there is the child, the wounded child, and the healthy child. And then you've also got the adult. So you've got a wounded adult, and you've got the healthy adult. So it's looking at the relationship between these three parts of your inner being that act out in your day-to-day life. So they play out. So sometimes how it can show up is, I don't know, my partner can say something and I react like a wounded inner teenager or something, or my
How does
boss.
that look in real life? Just to give an example, if you can share something practical.
Yeah, I mean, I think both me and my husband, we can both act like wounded inner teenagers sometimes. I'm just trying to find an example. Well, I guess if I feel like my needs are not being met, or, I feel a little bit like I'm not able to find an example right now. Yeah, I don't know, like if there's something that he's done that I feel upset about, and I react in a certain way.
And how do you distinguish? My question was basically, how do you distinguish when you react from your inner teenager, wounded inner teenager, inner adult, or the child? How do you know the difference?
I don't know if it's like, you know what? There's something that I'm trying to also think about, and your question is quite interesting because I don't know how much of it matters, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think sometimes like I like the theory of stuff. So this is the theoretical aspect of it, which is that we have a wounded child and a wounded teenager and an adult. So that kind of helps me understand it theoretically. But I guess in life, it's not theoretical, is it? So I might have a reaction. I don't know where that comes from. That could be my wounded teenager. It could be my child. I guess it doesn't matter so much. I don't know. That's just my thoughts.
What I found is that yes, you can. From one standpoint, it doesn't matter because you can just be with the emotion and embody it and regulate yourself with the the nervous system and allow yourself to express it through body, through sound, through touch, through movement, breath, voice. There's one aspect that it doesn't matter. You can just be there and process it. But then there's the deeper healing. What I found with internal family systems is that I can go to that feeling and I can go to where it was formed. And sometimes I find that it was in my teenage years, the shame aspect, not belonging to with my friends group, and feeling like I missed it all the time. And then sometimes I go to a sort of like emotions are like trailheads leading me to a certain exile, a wounded part of me. And there I can see when it was formed. So then I can see what.
Yes, yeah, and also looking at what that teenager in you needed, that maybe it out, and as an adult, giving that part of you what you needed, because we have that ability as adults. Maybe we didn't have that insight or the knowledge of that as a teenager, but as an adult, we can give that part of us what we need.
Yeah, for sure, and that's speaks very closely to internal family systems, because that's basically what it is. Listening to your parts' needs, well, put identifying, unblending from those parts so you could see them from the distance and not be merged with it so overtaken you can't really notice it anymore. It's like you become that anger. And then listening for the unmet needs, for the hurting that it's been endured, for all the hard work it's been doing for us, and then unburdening that, seeing what's behind it. Maybe there's an exile, a wound that needs to be met, attuning to those parts, extending loving kindness, and then they naturally integrate. So I feel it's quite a similar process to what Swaroop is teaching. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. It is similar in that we look at the different parts. So when we're looking at the teenager, we're looking at the adult part of us, the teenager and the child, and we're looking at how these three are interacting. And the process, like you mentioned, integration, is integrating those parts and finding the gifts and healing the wounds, essentially healing the points of where we struggled in our teenage years and going back to those teenage times. And there's different exercises we do, like we do some constellation work. There's a bit of gestalt, like where you get to see what's happening in your inner world in maybe a map, or you kind of find a way to there's role plays we do, there's different things that we do to help us find at what points we were wounded.
That's nice that you utilize various methodologies to meet those parts. And I've been to Tantra retreats as well. I don't know if that's very similar to what Farooq does or not, but we did some like inner child work and also role playing and expressing that anger, everything that came up. What other, so you said the role play, the constellations, the gestalt. What else do you, maybe actually, let's get practical here. What do you,
Sure.
do you do something by yourself as an inner practice to connect with that, to do the inner healing, something that our listeners could do by themselves?
Like a tool that you're saying that could be good?
Yeah, anything that comes to you that you find useful daily life for you yourself to process it.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first step of the journey is to meet that part of you, before even going into the wound and the kind of opening up the parents and all this, is that the adult part recognizes that there is a child part and that there is a teenage part. That in itself is quite a big thing. So we, alongside the gestalt and the role plays, we also do meditations. So the first part is just a meditation where your adult meets the child. And that's beautiful because it's like, I think when I was in Greece, when I did the primal, I was amazed at how real that part of me was. I thought, oh, the inner child work, this is like theoretical and okay, I've got an inner child and hug my inner child. But I was like, wow, this is a real wounded part of me that has needs, that has emotions, that feels things, that is sensitive. And meeting that child part I was neglecting because that's what happened in my childhood was quite a profound meeting. Just recognizing that I have an emotional part of my being which is just not functional and productive. It's the part of me that feels, and it feels everything, and it absorbed everything in my childhood. And not denying that part of me or feeling ashamed of it myself. That's also something that I've gained because I'm quite emotional and quite sensitive. And I don't know, I got this message when I was a teenager, don't be so sensitive, you're too emotional. So then I continued that in my adult life. But now it's like, oh, there is a part of me that is the child, and she's looking for my attention. She needs care, she needs attention, she needs that part of me to be heard and seen. So I'll just show you, actually. I have one practical small tool. I have a little teddy, and this this teddy is the child part of me. So we actually use the teddy in the process because it's a tool to connect to that vulnerable part of us. So I don't know if you've had experience of this with childhood work, but in our primal process, we had to carry this teddy around for like 8 days as a reminder that there is this sensitive, vulnerable, needing child in me, and not to neglect her, not to shame her, not to dismiss her, and not to put her aside. I think that's perhaps one tool. The first step is to recognize that I have it.
I can imagine a bunch of people just carrying teddies with them.
Yeah, so funny.
And actually, the first time I'm hearing this technique specifically, I guess not very practical, but I can see the use in that. Yeah, for sure.
What would be an example of a practical tool for you?
Well, for me, I guess what helps, I can just speak from my own experience, what helps me every day is actually just journaling. I just tune in and I ask myself, what parts are alive in me right now? And sometimes I get that there's this part that is really driving the work, mostly coming from that hero child, like I want to prove my worth and I want to accomplish great things and I want to do. And then there's this other part that is so tired that doesn't want to do anything. I mean, that came up a few days ago, but every day it's very different. So for me, it's actually just gaining awareness of all parts that are alive and seeing what are the needs. Okay, so you really want to work. I see. Okay, we can do 3 hours of work, and then we go to a massage, we go to walk by the beach, and just meeting needs of my or different parts, and checking in always every morning, waking up and just like, okay, hi, my inner child, how are you feeling? What would you like today? And just honestly just asking her every day, what would you like today? What my first question in my bullet journal, so I do two journals. One is my like therapeutic journal that I just do for my therapy journal, for my connecting with my parts, and one is my like planner bullet journal in Notion. And my first question every day when I wake up before starting work is, where is my excitement today? And that is basically speaking to that inner child part. Like, oh, where do you feel excited? Do you want to paint? Do you want to work? Do you want to explore this, I don't know, another therapeutic modality to learn? And when I dedicated myself this year to focus on my excitement, to do what excites that part of me at least a little bit, because then I am connected, I have energy, and everything is just flowing much smoother. So for me, it's just, I think journaling is a very underrated tool that can be transformational.
Yes, it's so powerful, isn't it? Just being able to express your thoughts and write them, and then also bring awareness to what's going on in your world and which parts being activated. I think I also find journaling very powerful for me, especially when I'm going through a strong emotion. If I'm dealing with something that's quite overwhelming and I need a way to express it, then I find writing about it, actually just putting it all down on paper and giving myself that space to almost vent, is kind of therapeutic.
Yes, actually, just the day before our recording, I recorded a video of 10 journaling ways, therapeutic journaling ways, how we can benefit your life. And I'm like, yes, all of that. And it can be very different and very useful. Okay, so we're finishing off. Is there something else that you think is important to mention around inner child work, teenage work, Tantra? Because we didn't really touch upon that and like nothing really. And I know there's upcoming training, 10 days. So this is a space for you to share something that you feel is important that you haven't gotten the space to.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think just go for it. Like, if, I think this is such beautiful work. The gifts that are there at the other side and the feedback that we've had, like, because we just finished a 10-session process now, and I had many people send me voice notes and messages, and some of the messages brought me to tears. It was like, I finally found peace with my parents. Everything in my life with my relationships, my energy levels have shifted. And it's such a precious journey. It's honestly the best thing that you could do for yourself, is to do this deep inner work. And I would just say everyone needs to try it, because I got so much value from it. And it was my soul's liberation. Like, I really found it helping me a lot. And especially with my parents as well, I found peace with my family. And that's something that no amount of money can buy, right? Finding peace with your parents and your past and really growing up is such a precious journey. So I would say, in some form or the other, do the work, explore, learn, grow, seek what you can. And also, from my experience, finding the right teachers are also really important, because there's so much hocus pocus out there. And especially, I don't know, my experience with the coaching world is to find a really experienced teacher who
I live in Bali. Like, every other person is a coach. So trust me, I know what you mean.
Yeah. And I've gone through that. I mean, I see that in London, everyone's coaching. And so, seek out the real teachers, the people that have got the experience and done the work themselves. There are really good teachers out there. And so I think, yeah, seek them out. And also we have in September a teenage process starting. So if anyone wants to join, then they're welcome to
And
participate.
that's going to be online, right?
It's online. It's 10 sessions. It starts in September and it goes on till January. So it's about once every 2 or 3 weeks. And we're going to be focusing on the teenager. It's led by Swaroop, so she leads it with a team of
I wish the time zones would match. Yeah, but I'm still planning to be in Bali since
Oh, so 5 o'clock will be
for me night.
night.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely. I really see a lot of value in joining a group program because it's not only you going through this process. And by witnessing, I went to a retreat for my inner child, and I think that was very transformative for me because it was not only my own process, but I could witness others' processes, how they're releasing all of that. And I'm like, oh, if they're allowing themselves to feel all of this intensity, it validated my own experience that I can feel it too. And that's why I see great value in, especially when it comes to like expressive, emotional, cathartic work.
Definitely. I was afraid of my emotions for such a long time, and I still do get afraid of my emotions. It's not like I'm, completely healed or anything like that. Like I still get afraid of it, but touching on my emotions, I was so scared of just looking at them, of going there, and slowly, bit by bit, unfreezing my world, because the emotions, I think, have a lot to offer. And if we can tune to all of them, like you said, the whole range, it actually makes us more human, doesn't it?
Oh, I think humanness is my word of the year, because I'm just fascinated by what that word entails, because I was so grown up to kind of feel that I need to fit into this perfect role and to be the hero child. That detached me from all the vulnerable feelings. And then I always was showing up perfectly. I have my life together, everything is great, living my dream life. And what that ended up what that ended up doing for me is that I couldn't really form that deep, intimate relationship where I felt seen truly for who I am, because I always felt that I have to wear this, I'm strong, everything's good, I'm happy, what can I do for you, how can I help you, so that's why it was like perpetuating me feeling distant from all my friends, and felt that I can only be loved and seen when I am happy and I can hold space for someone. And actually moving here to Bali and really finding people who are emotionally mature and who can hold that space allowed me to be more human, to allow that.
That's so, I love that. I love what you say. It's such a journey that you've been on. And like, I would love to know what inspired you to like go on this journey for yourself, because not everyone is doing this. So
when I was 12, I was reading this book, Finding Your Inner Happiness. And at that moment, I decided that I will dedicate my life to finding that inner happiness. And ever since then, that's what I've been doing, going through yoga and then, all the health, vitality, optimizations, so like very physical based, and now more into the somatic and the mind. It was like kind of going for the body, but then going into the mind and now coming back to the body and kind of integrating different spectrums of all of those. It's hard to describe very fast, but one more thing I want to say is about that freezing of the emotions. You can also see it in your body. And when I was in that Tantra retreat, actually, we were going through different chakras, and in my soul, in my second chakra, which is emotional chakra, sensation, it's pleasure, it was winter time, because it's orange, it's lively, it's vital, but for me it was totally frozen. It was a frozen land. And then in the process of the retreat, I defrosted it. I brought sun and summer into that center. And, my life really shifted. So, that's very beautiful. I'm wondering if you're doing something like that as well.
Yes, actually, I just finished. This is a tool that could help, referring to your last. I did do a meditation called Osho Kundalini meditation. I don't know if you've tried it.
Oh, yeah. Many times.
Yeah. This is like my favorite meditation. So I just finished 21 days. So I was doing it every day. And this is great meditation to do if you struggle with being frozen or frozen feelings, because it's basically shaking. So you shake for 15 minutes. And, there's been so much science now around shaking and, helping or healing or like where did I do it? In my somatic trauma introduction training, they talked about how birds or animals, when encounter something traumatic, the first thing they do is shake, so shaking is a really great way of unfreezing or getting, unstuck. So there's shaking for 15 minutes, then there's dancing for 15 minutes, and then there's sitting in silence and you listen to bells. It's like really beautiful music. And then you lie down for 15 minutes. So this is my favorite meditation.
You don't have the screaming part?
No, that's dynamic.
Oh, right. Okay.
Dynamic is a stronger meditation, and that's where you process all your emotions. It's not just anger, but it's also the whole range of it. That's dynamic.
Okay, so like I'm mistaken those two maybe then,
Yeah. Kundalini is a softer form of meditation. I find dynamic quite hard. I mean, I've done it.
For me, I wouldn't do it every day for sure. No, it's too much. That's why I was like, you do it every day. No. So you do the Kundalini Osho meditation.
Kundalini Osho meditation, yeah, it's 1 hour, and I love it. It really works. There are lots of other meditations, like there's also Nada Brahma, which involves humming, which is good for the nervous system. So I think with meditation, it's about finding the one that you enjoy and then sticking with it. And I find that meditation with therapy is very important, because when you're doing the therapeutic work with wounds and trauma, and a lot of disturbing things can come out. So having that space where you are meditating in whatever way you like enjoy, whether that's a silent sitting or an active meditation, can hold the process. So Swaroop actually talks about bringing therapy and meditation together. So whilst you're working on therapy, having some kind of a meditation practice, in my experience, has helped me, because there was a time when I was just doing therapy and I wasn't meditating, and I found it too much. It was, it wasn't grounding me, because there's so much difficult stuff coming out.
Because therapy is basically you have to practice it every day. And the key thing that Dick Schwartz, the founder of IFS, is saying, that you have to every day show up and hold space for those parts. Every morning, check in. And your progress is only going to be as good as your ability to check in every day with those parts. And also what you said about the shaking meditation and everything, I love it. I totally love it. And also I'm thinking 1 hour meditation for a lot of people probably is going to be too much. So what I want to say is, if you can, definitely do it. But even I don't do it.
I don't do it. Sorry, go on.
No, what I do is I just do literally 20 seconds of shaking after every shower. I take a shower and I just have a practice of just shaking everything that's not serving me. So because I shower every day at least 2 times, I always then incorporate shaking practice. And I call it also shake off the water, so I have to use towel less. So it's kind of very practical as well. And then I do the activation where I just tap myself. Again, sometimes I don't even need to use a towel after that. But jokes aside, it really makes me feel super refreshed after every shower and very aligned. And actually, even like every Balinese healer that I went to was telling me to do a shaking practice.
Really?
And the tapping. Yeah. So it's very, yeah, it is very embraced by various cultures and
Yeah,
very important too. So I'm happy that we came up to this
the
shaking,
shaking.
tapping, and yeah, releasing, because sometimes, a lot of times actually, I feel like there's nothing to release. I'm living a calm, peaceful life. But when I start doing the shaking, a lot of times something comes up, either in just a visual or an emotion, and just to have that space in your day protected to feel whatever you haven't processed, to
Yeah.
allow that space. Yeah.
Allow whatever's coming up for you that could have been strong in the day, or I've heard there's such a thing as shaking retreats. I don't know if that's true or not, but
Probably it's true.
probably it's
given
true.
given
Yeah. Yeah, probably it is true. But it's interesting because a lot of these meditations, like even humming, just closing your eyes and humming can be really relaxing for the nervous system. Um, like I haven't gone enough into the science behind it. I would love to do more research and see, well, what is the science behind shaking or humming. I mean, I've read some stuff, but I think there is quite a lot of science behind it, as people are looking more into trauma and looking at ways
yeah.
to heal trauma. But I do remember this specific example, which was how animals, they showed us a video, and it was a deer that got attacked by a lion, but somehow the lion escaped. And the first thing the deer did was shake. You just shake, shake, shake. And it was shaking like this for 10, 15 minutes. And then it just got up and ran its way. And they used that as an example to say that in a natural animal kingdom, animals don't actually carry trauma unless they're confined. It's only humans that carry trauma, which I was like, that's interesting. So I think I love what you shared about it doesn't have to be an hour meditation. It could be when you're coming out the shower just to shake it off, or just to have that space in the day where you process your emotions somehow, whatever that works for you.
Yeah, to hold space, because what I'm realizing, no matter how much work I do, there's still always going to be situations where I can't fully express or hold space
Yeah.
for myself. So just to it's not and you don't have to. There are situations socially that you cannot express, and that's okay, but just to have that space where you can every day at least like recharge, or yeah, something like that. So that's beautiful. And the last question I have for you is, what is vitality for you?
Vitality.
Yeah.
That's an question. Is that in context to like childhood or teenage, or is that just
It's just a general, like, what comes up to you? What do you see as a life that's full of vitality?
that's a really interesting question. Um, you know, I love, I don't know, have you ever seen like or been with a really old person who still has that childhood kind of joy in them? That's like how I'm viewing vitality, is that if I have the difference between growing old and growing up. So everyone grows old. And my feeling, the more I do this work and the more I'm absorbing Swaroop's teachings, she's like 71 and she's the most vital woman I've ever met. She's like so full of inner child qualities and playfulness and spontaneity. And so I don't think age has anything to do with vitality. I feel that the qualities that we have as a child, we can continue that childlikeness. And that's been interesting because I'm turning 40 next year. And I remember when I was in my teenage years thinking, I'm not even going to make it past 30. Like, I didn't even think I'd be alive after 30. And I'm feeling more like alive and more I'm excited about life, and I don't feel like I don't know, when I was a child, I just remember seeing adults like a bit dreary and, functional, and it doesn't have to be that way. So I guess when you share that question, I think I'm trying to make a link between vitality has nothing to do with age. Vitality is a quality that we could have at any age. We could continue that till we're 100 years old, hopefully. I don't know. I'm not there yet.
That's very inspiring, and that is. And I'm feeling it's such a gift to witness such people who are in this ripe age and who are embodying these qualities, because when I was working as a hypnotherapist, because now I mostly do internal family systems with a bit of hypnotherapy just to deepen the process. But when I was primarily doing hypnotherapy, and normally I would just do this like first exercise of, connecting to a person that you want to embody a quality like theirs. And a lot of people, I was surprised actually, they didn't have anyone they could look up for joy, excitement, for lightness, for love, because all they've seen was that struggle. So surrounding yourself with people like that can be very healthy for your own development.
So true. It's so true. Like when we find those gems, I think, that are showing it a different way, that it is possible, helps me anyway. That's why I've always kind of connected with women that are older to me. That's been something that I've always had female friends that are maybe 8-9 years older, that are doing something different with their life, that are inspiring me in some ways. That's helped me a lot, especially in my 20s and 30s. Finding those people that are inspiring us somehow, or showing us another way.
Yeah, showing another way, giving hope. Thank you so much. It was such a beautiful conversation. It was so natural and flowing, at the same time deep. And I hope that listeners can take away that feeling and start to look deeper into behind their emotions, reactions, their lives, and just notice those parts and find, teachers that they resonate with. So thank you so much for being here, and I will link all your details below so people can follow your journey and get acquainted with the teachings that you share. So thank you so much for being here, for sharing your wisdom.
Thank you. It was great to dialogue with you and find a connection in both of our journeys. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the end. It shows you really care about your well-being. And if you're enjoying the show, then rating, subscribing, and sharing with a friend would really help the show to grow. And since I'm not a big fan of mindless consumption of information, I really want to encourage you to solidify your learning by writing down key takeaways from this episode and sharing either on social media or with your friends. And lastly, I love connecting with you guys, so please come say hi to me on Instagram at Elena Kundro. And if you're interested in working one-on-one with me, exploring all parts of yourself, then feel free to reach out to me to see if I have any spots available. Until next time!